One of Henry VIII's 6 wives was also his sister. This week, we reveal the strangest confessions Henry desperately wanted to take with him to the grave, and the ruthless blackmail scheme his sister wife used to snatch the crown jewels and palaces from England's most powerful tyrant. But be warned. The truth about this woman was so dangerous, it cost Henry's most loyal friend his head. In the autumn of 1537, Henry VIII was one bad day away from losing his mind. Surprisingly, the king survived this incredibly difficult time only thanks to someone with a disability. Henry is known for his desperate need to have a male heir who could secure the Tudor dynasty once and for all. When his second wife, Anne Boleyn, failed to fulfill his wishes, he fabricated charges against her and had the poor woman executed for adultery, treason, and incest. But there was another major motivation behind Henry's actions. Even though he had been insanely obsessed with Anne for years, the spell eventually broke, and the king found a new love. According to him, this time it was his true love, Jane Seymour. Henry married her only 11 days after Anne's execution. He also wasted no time trying for a male heir, believing that this time, his greatest dream of having a powerful son who could lead England into a golden age would come true. This dream came true, but only partly. On October 12, 1537, Jane gave birth to Edward VI. After 2 failed marriages and no male heirs, Jane turned out to be the one and only, his true wife, who finally gave him exactly what he wanted after decades of waiting. But fulfilling this dream came at a price, a massive price. Just 12 days later, because of childbirth complications, which were very common in the 16th century, Jane passed away. It's hard to imagine how terrible this must have felt for Henry, but historical records paint a clear picture of the Tudor king's bizarre ways of coping with the loss. The first thing Henry did was flee to Windsor Castle. He locked himself away, refusing to see anyone except a few select advisors. While this may seem harsh by modern standards, because of strict Tudor protocol, Henry couldn't even attend Jane's funeral. This was also the moment when the king's famous overeating began as a way to cope with his grief. But Henry also had a surprising person who helped him survive this time, his court jester, Will Somers. You might think it was because he made the king laugh during dark times, but actually, it wasn't about that at all. Somers had a disability that the Tudors actually considered priceless. Modern researchers believe that the famous court jester had an intellectual or developmental disability. Because of this, Somers brought several things to the grieving king that no one else in England could provide. Everyone else approaching Henry's door wanted land, titles, money, or religious favors. Somers had no ambition, making him the only truly safe person in the room. Somers was legally and socially allowed to speak the brutal, unvarnished truth without being executed for treason. He could look Henry in the eye and address his grief or his temper directly. When Henry was in one of his dark moods, Somers was known to sit quietly with him, offer a simple joke to break the tension, or simply listen to the king vent his immense grief. But Jane's death didn't just break Henry. It created a crisis that threatened the future of the entire kingdom. This is where Henry's sister wife enters the story. Henry's new wife humiliated him in a way no previous or future wife ever dared to. His ego was absolutely shattered, but it happened because of his own big mistake, caused by his obsession with medieval romance stories. Henry finally had a son, Prince Edward. But having only one male heir was a huge gamble in Tudor times. Mortality was high, and if Edward died, England risked sliding back into the civil war that was so deeply feared. Henry needed more sons, which meant he had to get back on the marriage market as quickly as possible. For about 2 years after Jane died, Henry actually took his time. But by 1539, he had no other choice. A massive political nightmare was coming true. The two Catholic superpowers of Europe, France under Francis I and the Holy Roman Empire under Charles V, signed a truce. Suddenly, England was isolated, vulnerable, and facing a very real threat of a Catholic invasion backed by the Pope. Henry's chief minister, Thomas Cromwell, had to come up with a plan very quickly, and he did. He decided that England needed to ally with the German Protestants. They were not quite the same brand of Protestant as Henry, but they shared a common enemy, the Catholic Holy Roman Emperor. Cromwell turned his attention to the Duchy of Cleves, located in modern-day Germany. The Duke of Cleves was in a bitter legal and territorial dispute with the Holy Roman Emperor, making him the perfect anti-papal ally. The Duke also happened to have two unmarried female relatives, Amalia and Anne. And this is where Henry got catfished, but in a way that could only happen in the 1500s. Henry, traumatized by his previous marriages and getting older, was obsessed with finding a wife who was beautiful and gentle. He sent his court painter, Hans Holbein the Younger, to Germany, with strict orders to paint the sisters exactly as they looked, with no flattering filters. When Henry saw Holbein's portrait of Anne, who was literally half his age, he fell in love. She looked demure, elegant, and very attractive. In his eyes, this was the woman who was going to cure his broken heart after Jane's death and save England. The marriage treaty was signed in October 1539. But Henry and Anne of Cleves' first meeting was a disaster, and one of the most embarrassing royal encounters in all of European history. Henry did something so embarrassing that he would never have wanted us to remember or talk about this shameful moment. For a king meeting a foreign princess as part of an important marriage deal, it was very unusual and risky, and it was all inspired by the stories Henry had grown up with. He was completely obsessed with medieval chivalry and courtly romance stories. In the world of medieval romances, such as tales of King Arthur or French courtly love poems, there was a classic trope. A knight or king would disguise himself as a servant, messenger, or beggar to meet his true love. According to the rules of these stories, true love was so powerful that the lady would instinctively recognize her soulmate through the disguise, falling instantly in love with his inner nobility before knowing he was royal. Henry fancied himself the ultimate romantic hero, but it backfired terribly. To make it worse, he had been playing this exact game at the English court for decades. He would dress up as a Robin Hood figure or a masked stranger at court pageants and surprise the ladies. The women of the English court, including his previous wives, Catherine of Aragon and Anne Boleyn, knew the rules of the game. They would pretend to be shocked, act deeply charmed by this mysterious stranger, and then feign utter amazement when he unmasked himself. Henry's massive ego actually believed his own hype. He genuinely thought women were naturally swooning over his personal charm, completely forgetting that he was the king and that everyone knew it was him. When he rode to Rochester on New Year's Day in 1540 to surprise Anne of Cleves, he expected the exact same fairy tale ending. He put on a mottled gray cloak, burst into her room pretending to be a lowly messenger bringing a gift, and tried to aggressively embrace and kiss her. But nobody had explained the rules of English courtly love games to Anne. She was from a deeply conservative, strict German court. To her, this was not a dashing medieval romance. It was a terrifying, heavily overweight man taking wild liberties and acting highly inappropriately. Anne, not knowing it was the king, pushed him away and fearfully looked back out the window at a bull-baiting match outside. This destroyed Henry's ego. He already had a cruel revenge prepared for Anne, one that would stain her reputation for centuries. After the huge embarrassment, Henry stooped so low that he said absolutely cruel things about Anne, including details about the most private moments of their marriage. Some of these quotes are so bad that we put them on our Patreon only. By joining our community there, you also unlock exclusive videos, dark history facts, an ad-free experience, and much more. Link in description. After the meeting, Henry went back to his room, stripped off his disguise, and bitterly declared, "I like her not." He immediately stormed back to London and demanded that his chief minister, Thomas Cromwell, who had arranged the marriage, find a legal way out of the contract. The king claimed Anne looked nothing like the portrait he had been shown, calling her not only unattractive, but also saying things no woman would ever want to hear from her husband. Henry's lawyers spent days frantically looking for a pre-contract or an unfinished diplomatic treaty that would invalidate the match. Unfortunately for Henry, the German ambassadors from Cleves stood firm. There was no way to cancel the wedding. On January 6, 1540, just 5 days after their disastrous first meeting, they were married at Greenwich. As had been planned beforehand, the marriage was expected to produce a male heir, but the wedding night was a total failure. Anne was so sheltered and naive that she thought everything was going well. She told her ladies-in-waiting, "When he comes to bed, he kisseth me, and he taketh me by the hand, and biddeth me, Good night, dear darling, and in the morning kisseth me and biddeth me, Farewell, darling." Is this not enough? Henry, on the other hand, blamed his inability to fulfill his duty entirely on Anne, famously complaining to his doctors the next morning that Anne smelled bad and also body-shaming her. As bizarre as this marriage already was, it actually gets even crazier because Anne of Cleves legally became Henry VIII's sister. Unsurprisingly, the marriage was a nightmare for Anne. She was completely different from Henry's other wives. There was a significant barrier that made everything awkward. This made privacy impossible and destroyed any chance of them building natural chemistry. Henry found her intellectually limited, largely because they could not have a normal conversation, which added immense strain to an already rocky relationship. Henry expected cultural sophistication and witty banter, like he had experienced with his previous wives. But Henry's fourth wife had been raised in a strict German court and taught only needlework, not politics, philosophy, or music, as English noblewomen often were. Even though the king was cold to Anne of Cleves, the rest of the English court actually liked her. She was described by contemporaries as gentle, virtuous, and docile. But the danger of Henry VIII's court soon began to haunt Anne. It was not hard for Anne to notice that the king did not want her. This was likely terrifying. She knew exactly what had happened to Henry's first two wives. Catherine of Aragon had been cast out and died alone, and Anne Boleyn had been executed. Henry's new wife had to be incredibly careful with her every move. Otherwise, she literally risked imprisonment or losing her head. 6 months after the marriage, Henry decided to finally do something about his new wife, with a surprising outcome. Anne's only true confidant was a German woman named Mrs. Lowe, who had traveled with her from Cleves. Anne confided in her that she was incredibly homesick and stressed, though she was too private to show it to the court. It was also clear to everyone that the biggest problem during the marriage was that Henry and Anne literally could not talk to each other. Anne spoke only German fluently. Henry, who prided himself on being a brilliant intellectual, spoke English, French, and Latin. By June, Henry used the excuse of a plague outbreak in London to send Anne away to Richmond Palace. She went quietly, likely relieved to be away from the tense atmosphere, completely unaware that within weeks, something would happen that would change her entire life forever. Anne of Cleves, despite not being as highly educated as some of Henry VIII's other wives, is actually considered one of the most intelligent queens of the Tudor king. That is because we can say she brilliantly used, and perhaps even blackmailed, the king to her advantage, eventually becoming known as the king's sister. Just months after the wedding, the fragile peace between France and the Holy Roman Empire completely collapsed. They began arguing over who controlled Milan and soon went right back to threatening each other. The threat of a united Catholic invasion disappeared. Henry no longer needed a political shield in Germany, which meant the Cleves alliance suddenly became dead weight. To make Anne of Cleves' marriage even more hopeless, Henry set his eyes on Catherine Howard, Anne's lady-in-waiting, who was around 30 years younger than him. The king desperately wanted out of the marriage and plotted with his loyal advisor, Thomas Cromwell, about how to do it properly. Both men feared that Anne would fight the divorce like his first wife, Catherine of Aragon, and humiliate the king even further. But this is where Anne played her cards perfectly. She knew that if she fought the divorce, it could trigger a massive international crisis that might ruin England financially and politically. She also knew she could easily be put on trial, imprisoned, or even executed, just like the previous Anne. The Queen had a better idea, one that would benefit her for the rest of her life. Anne completely submitted to Henry's wishes. She agreed that the marriage had never been consummated and was therefore invalid. Henry was so thrilled and relieved by her cooperation that he showered her with rewards. She was given a status above all other women in England, second only to Henry's new queen and his daughters. She received a generous annual pension of £4,000, worth millions in today's money. She was also given multiple royal manors and castles, including Hever Castle, the former family home of Anne Boleyn, and Richmond Palace. She was granted the right to own property, manage her own household, and remain free from her brother's control back in Germany. Anne walked away as one of the richest and most independent women in Europe. But even this was not all. Rather than sending her back to Germany in shame, Henry officially adopted Anne into his family, giving her the official title of King's beloved sister. An extremely strange decision, even by 16th century standards, since it meant calling your ex-wife your sister. But do not mistake this for the happy ending of Anne of Cleves' story, because it was not. After the divorce, she actually faced a huge problem, despite what history enthusiasts often want you to believe. While Anne cleverly escaped execution after her marriage to Henry VIII, one man had to pay the price instead: Henry's most loyal friend, Thomas Cromwell. Ironically, Cromwell was the same man who had masterminded the executions of many of Henry's enemies, including his second wife, Anne Boleyn. To make matters even more ironic, there was an accident during Cromwell's execution that made his death even worse. Cromwell had spent a decade making vicious enemies among the old conservative nobility, most notably Thomas Howard, the Duke of Norfolk. They had been waiting for Cromwell to slip up, and the Anne of Cleves disaster gave them the perfect opening. Norfolk swooped in and introduced Henry to his young, attractive niece, Catherine Howard. Henry fell head over heels in love. He wanted to punish the man who had forced him into a humiliating, loveless marriage. This was his rule: never make the king look foolish. On June 10, 1540, during a routine Privy Council meeting, Cromwell was suddenly arrested for treason and heresy. He was never given a trial. Instead, his enemies used a bill of attainder, a legal device Cromwell himself had popularized to bypass trials for the king's enemies, to condemn him to death. While locked in the Tower of London, Cromwell was forced to perform one final task for his king. He wrote a detailed, humiliating testimony confirming that Henry's marriage to Anne of Cleves was invalid. This document gave Henry the legal grounds to annul the marriage. On July 28, 1540, the exact same day Henry married Catherine Howard, Cromwell was led to the scaffold and executed. Unfortunately, Cromwell was given an inexperienced executioner who took multiple attempts before finishing the job. Anne of Cleves got away with it, but even after becoming one of the wealthiest women in England, Henry's son, Edward VI, stood in the way of her happiness. After Henry VIII's death, the new king and his advisors did something cruel to Anne that left her absolutely hopeless. She was no longer protected. After the divorce, free from the pressure of producing an heir, Henry and Anne actually developed a warm, genuine friendship. They exchanged gifts, and she was a frequent, welcome guest at court. In fact, during the Christmas holidays of 1540, just months after their divorce, Anne visited the king and his new queen. Anne showed perfect humility to the new queen, danced with her, and dined alongside Henry in high spirits. When Catherine Howard was executed for treason in 1542, Anne and her brother's diplomats quietly campaigned for Henry to take Anne back. Because their friendship was now so strong, her family thought it would be a perfect match. However, Henry firmly shut the idea down. Anne was like a sister to him. He chose Catherine Parr as his sixth wife instead. Despite the rejection, Anne remained gracious and friendly with the new Queen Catherine. Anne was uniquely beloved by Henry's children, particularly Princess Mary and Princess Elizabeth. Then Henry VIII died, Edward VI became king, and everything changed. His advisors were aggressive, ambitious, and desperate to fund wars against Scotland. Anne of Cleves, a foreign woman, became an easy target. The Regency Council began forcing Anne into unfair land exchanges. They took away her beloved, highly profitable estates, including Richmond Palace and Bletchingley, and replaced them with less valuable lands that generated far less income. To make matters worse, the government routinely delayed or withheld her £4,000 annual stipend. By 1550, Anne's situation was so dire that she began writing frantic letters to Edward VI's advisors and to her close friend, Princess Mary. In her letters, she explicitly stated that she could not pay her servants or maintain her remaining households. She even wanted to leave England, but she was forbidden to do so. Her financial rescue finally came in 1553, when Edward VI died and her close friend, Princess Mary, became queen. Mary restored some of Anne's financial privileges, settled many of her outstanding debts, and granted her new, more stable properties. As Anne aged, her health began to fail, but she spent her final 4 years in the comfort and financial security she had originally been promised. Anne died at Chelsea Old Manor on July 15, 1557, at the age of 41, likely from cancer. She outlived Henry VIII and all 5 of his other wives. Queen Mary ordered a royal funeral for her, and she was buried with great honor in Westminster Abbey. But Henry VIII's wives actually hid far darker secrets. One of them was actually inbred. Watch the next video for her shocking story.